So last week, pretty happy with where we ended up. We have the supports put in place on our forge casing. The refractory brick sits in there nice and neat, snug but not too tight, level, which is exactly what we wanted. Now, what we need to do is I need to create the support for the inside of this door. I'm going to be using a fairly substantial piece of steel. I'm going to be cutting it so that the width of it will fit neatly in between the supports that I already have mounted and doesn't interfere with the corners. I'm going to be taking a piece of refractory brick, same thickness as the interior bricks. I'm going to be also cutting that so that it also matches the curvature. This plate will end up with a couple of pins up through it, coming up to about half the thickness of our brick. I'm going to be drilling holes through this plate and then countersinking it on the other side so that I can weld these pins in so that they sit about half the thickness of my brick. And then with my handy dandy masonry drill bits, I'll drill out a couple of holes that match those pins, and that way when the brick is formed and shaped, it will sit on top of the steel plate, which will keep it from moving around or sliding, but if I need to change it, I can change it relatively easily. Once that's all done, I'll be doing pretty much the same thing on the other end. Anything I'm doing on this end, I'm going to be duplicating on the other end. Not as complex, of course. Doesn't need to be, simply due to the fact that we don't have this swinging door at the other end. Now the reason I want this pinned here, pretty simple. Having this big door will allow us to open this end of the forge up, which will give us a maximum opening for doing for working on bigger pieces or slightly bigger projects. Also, if we're doing maintenance on the inside of the forge, changing out the ends of the burners, that kind of thing, without taking the burners out, we'll be able to pull that off with these pins in place, without the danger of, oh, I swung the door open and wham, out goes that chunk of refractory brick shattering on the floor, doing damage to my poor hapless feet. So that's where we're sitting at right now with that. Projection for the week. Last week I was pretty optimistic. I actually thought there was a possibility I was going to get the insulation in. I'm not going to be quite as optimistic this week. I just want to get the casing to the point where that will be a possibility going forward, that we will be ready with the casing with nothing else to be done on it, so that we can just begin next week with putting in our insulation. So that's where we're sitting right now. Cheers, my friends. And we'll see you on the other side. So what we're doing here is using my machinist square and this little bubble level I've got inside of it here. I'm just going to determine the height of my inside rest. And that's the top of the inside rest, so that's where the top of this surface has got to be on the door. And just using my white pencil here so I can see it, I'm just going to transfer that line now onto my door. I'm going to do that all the way along here. Just one more spot. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is, I've marked my center on my door, so that's my center line coming down. Taking my steel plate now, and what I've done is determine where the door intersects with the plate using a straight edge, And using that straight edge too, I've measured that distance between the edge of my steel and the edge of my door. And what I've done is I followed that along. Follow that all the way along with my straight edge, making sure that I've got about 7/8 of an inch all the way around, because that's the distance I've got between there and there. 7/8 of an inch all the way down to this mark here, and roughed in my curvature. Doesn't have to be absolute. I'm going to be grinding that out, but then I can sand out any kind of discrepancies of that on the sander. So that's my next step. Going to cut those off. Make sure that fits in nice and neat. Then what I'll be doing next after that is creating a couple of tabs, nowhere near this size of course, but a couple of tabs that will be coming down off the bottom of this, putting some holes in those, and then corresponding holes in my door. I'll slot those and make them a little bit gappy so that this plate can move horizontally, move a little bit laterally, and that way we can determine where it is and how nice and neat it fits underneath here. So that's where we're sitting with that. Moving on. Okay, we've got our piece cut, roughed. We're doing some sanding on it right now. I'm just going to touch it up a little bit more. It's hard to hear me over the beast here, so I'm not going to try to talk while I'm grinding. So still just got to take it down to the chalk line. I got a bit of a chalk line marked here. With the angle grinder I got outside, I basically did my cutoffs. Just got it close to the line, but not onto the line. It's always easier to take material away on the sander than it is to put stuff back on. So, anywho, start up the piece. This beastie can take away material pretty fast, so mind you, this is a pretty thick plate, so taking any burr off that's there. Okay, use the water. Give it a bit of a cool off. Always keep a bucket by the sander. Okay. On to the next. We have our plate cut, sanded, beveled. So now it fits right at our line on the big door, which is where we want it. Our next step with this is going to be creating a couple of tabs that will be sitting on angles. Those will have holes in them so we can bolt these onto our door. Also, we're going to end up cutting off a couple of pieces of the bar. I'm going to drill a couple of holes in the plate, countersink on the opposite side, on the bottom side, and we'll be welding those into place. They'll stick up about 1/2 inch, so that when we take our refractory brick here, and grind it and sand it down to the size we want. We're also going to use our masonry bit, drill a couple of holes in there so that when it sits, it'll sit on those pins, and that way it won't be shifting around or moving around anywhere. So that's where we're sitting at with that right now. Once we get the brick cut, sanded, and put in place, then I'm going to mark the inside of my forge door here, the big door here, so that we can look at cutting the work door into the outside of the casing here. It'll make it a lot easier too, as I'm lining this up, making sure that it fits underneath our main refractory bricks inside of the forge. Anyway, that's where we're sitting. On to the next. Okay, we have our holes in place, and with the use of the air tool and a little bit of filing, we've got them slotted so that we have some movement. I haven't got this in tight right yet, but you can see how it's sitting. Those slots will allow that up and down movement I was talking about. Just don't want to drop my nuts here. So now what I'm going to do is get this line back up on the hinge. Make sure it fits in here, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of tailoring just to make sure it works properly. I'll probably end up just rounding these off just a bit so they make their clearances easily on the inside support. So, not everybody has air tools to use. I mean, they speed up the process, they're really handy to have, but you can do any of this just simply using, you know, your regular, common, everyday hand drills, or drill press if you have it, and a little bit of work with a round file just to lengthen your slot. Now, you'll see I use these golf balls. Makes a really good hand holder. They stay on. It takes a bit of work to get them off. They do come off, but golf balls are easy to come by, especially around here with the golf courses. Anyhow, next step, once I get this lined up and fitting nicely, have the hinge assembled, have the door working properly, I'm going to make sure, once I've got this bolted in nice and tight, I'm going to take a chunk of my refractory brick, just make sure that my height is right, and I'm going to cut my door. So I will cut my door in here. It's where I want to be. I want to get that as close to being done by Friday as I can. I'd like to get this to the point where next week, like I said, I want to start insulating. So it'd be really nice to get this forge up and running. It's not critical, I have the other forge, but I'm really beginning to get excited about having this particular unit up and running. So, okay, I'm going to reassemble the door, check my measurements, decide where I'm going to make my next cuts. So, I will talk to you guys on the other side. Okay, we've got our door all roughed in. Nice big opening that I can work through, and I can see everything that I need to see right now. It's all lining up perfectly. Now, the next step with this, of course, is that I can't just leave it raw like this. So I'm going to end up taking some angle iron or just flat, probably just flat sheet. I'm going to create a frame for my door all the way around with a large rest on this side. It'll be the same on the other side as well, so I'll have a rest on both ends. That's where we're sitting right now. On to the next. So right now I'm just drilling the holes for our pins. I've already drilled our pilot holes. And right now what I'm going to do is drive a new hole in that will be close to the size that we require to put the pins in. I always put a little bit of oil. It saves the life of our bits, keeps them cooler, helps a little bit with the cutting. Now again, you don't want to force your bit. Let your bit do its own work. Long tails, good sign. So make sure you're wearing glasses, goggles. Remember, you can get slivers quite easily from this stuff. It doesn't take a lot of oil. I'm cheap, I don't like to break bits. Okay. I'm just going to check this against our... Also, I'm going to go, I think, one size bigger. Just so this slips in. Change up my bit. I'm going to make this a little bit big. I'm going to be countersinking it and filling it with weld on the bottom side. Check my clearance. Just lower my table a little bit. Okay, I've got this secured with a set of vice grips, so I've got a better hold on it. Again, don't force your bits. If the bit's dull, replace it. Bit locked. Turn it off, reverse it. There we go. There, lots of play. Okay. Probably would have liked it a little bit tighter, but unfortunately, I don't have the in-between bit. But that's not bad. Cool. Alrighty. So I'm going to countersink that now. And so I'm countersinking it on the bottom side, okay? Because when we put this in, I'm not going to put any weld on the surface because I want my brick to fit flush. So when that pin is in there, like so, I want this countersunk so that there's a nice cavity to put my weld into, make it nice and solid on the bottom. Okay. Onto the sander, onto the grinder, and away we go. The end of another week. Our door is moving along. We've got our ledge in place with our pins for our refractory brick. It closes nicely and neatly, everything matches up. Our clearances on the inside are good. Our opening is cut. We still have to frame it, still have to get a rest. Still have to match all of that up on the other end. But we're out of time. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, remember, hit that like button. Feel free to subscribe. You'll see a little icon down in the left-hand corner of the picture. You can hit on that, or you can go below the picture and hit the subscribe there. But until next week, cheers, my friends. And as I say, we'll see you on the other side.